welcome to lecture number 9, classes and objects. So, in the last lecture, we had seen default constructor and parameterized constructor, right. So, with the help of parameterized constructor, so can we solve this particular problem, all right. So, the problem is create a complex number class, right, the name of the class is complex numbers, and add two complex numbers, right, it is nothing. So, C1 is A1 plus IB1, C2 is equal to A2 plus IB2. In fact, we had seen the multiplication. So, C1 plus C2. So, let us say C3 is C1 plus C2. So, which will be A1 plus A2 plus I into B1 plus B2, right. So, this we know. So, let us solve this using the parameterized constructor, all right. So, the main idea is, so when you are adding two complex numbers, you take one number from user. So, let us say C1 I am taking from the user and C2 should be passed using the constructor. So, you are passing. So, when I am passing means I have to use as an argument, right. So, that means it is having the parameter. So, that means it is a parameterized constructor. So, another input should be using the constructor. So, let us see how we are going to write this in C++. So, let us have the class complex. So, the class complex has two member data, real and imaginary. It is almost similar thing we had seen, the multiplication of two complex numbers. And here you have the parameterized constructor. So, we had seen the name of the class is complex and the name of the special member function is also complex. So, obviously, it is a constructor and we are using two parameters R and I, the real and imaginary. So, therefore, you call this as a parameterized constructor. So, you have used the parameterized constructor. So, R will be initialized, right, whatever you are passing that will be initialized to real, and whatever you are passing for I that will be initialized to imaginary, right. So, this is a special member function, a constructor, line number 11 to 14. Now, here you go, you have line number 17, correct. So, line number 17 you have a member function called add, right, you have a member function called add. So, we have two arguments. So, one is C1 and another one is C2. So, two complex numbers. We have already calculated how to add, that means C1 dot real plus C2 dot real, A1 plus A2, right. So, this is what we worked out, A1 plus A2, that means the real numbers, the real part will be added and then imaginary part should be added. So, the real part will be added, put some real and another variable some imaginary. So, C1 dot imaginary plus C2 dot imaginary, put it in some imaginary and you are returning complex some real and some imaginary, all right. Return the object, all right, the name of the object is, right, the complex with some real and some imaginary, correct. So, we will see how this is working when we are going to talk about the main. So, now line number 24 you have void display, one of the member functions, all right. So, it is printing real plus I into imaginary or imaginary I, okay. So, 2 plus 3 I, that is the usual way, all right. So, that will be displayed over here. So, now what was the problem? One input you have to take from the user, right. So, it is asking user real and user imaginary, right. So, we have a double, the main program is starting here, user real and user imaginary. So, we take the input from the user, for example, assume that. So, 2 plus 3 I is my input, user input, right. So, now here you go, I have user complex object, right, user complex object, I am passing user real and user imaginary, right. So, whatever I have taken the input from the user, I am passing this. So, this is the object user complex. So, that means this will invoke, right, whenever you are creating an object, this will invoke the constructor, right. So, the constructor will be invoked, suppose I am passing to plus 3i, right? Yes. So, real will be 2 and imaginary will be 3, right, in the first case. So, that means under user complex object my real will be 2 and imaginary part will be 3, alright. And you have another object called constructor complex. So, the constructor complex you are passing 3.5 and 2.0. So, one we said user has to give us the input, another one you are passing. So, this is an example, right. So, 3.5 and 2.0, assume that 3.5 plus 2.0 I, right. So, when this object is being created, again the constructor will be called. So, under this object name, what is the object name? Constructor complex. So, your real will be whatever number you have passed and imaginary will be whatever number you have passed. So, I passed 3.5 and 2.0, alright. So, this is by user and this is by constructor, right. I hope you understood. So, now we will see further, alright. So, now we are calling, alright. So, let us say complex result is an object, alright. So, complex result is an object. So, that object is invoking add, right. So, that object is invoking add. So, you are passing user complex and constructor complex, alright. So, this is what exactly we are doing in the case of add complex C1. So, now C1 is user, right, user complex, C1 is nothing but user complex and C2 is nothing but constructor complex. So, now here C1 and C2, so the corresponding C1 real and C2 real will be added, right, user complex real part and user complex, right, constructor complex real part will be added. Similarly, the respective imaginary part will be added. Now, it is some real and some imaginary, alright. So, now it is returning complex, right. So, which is carrying some real and some imaginary, right. For example, if I am adding 2 plus 3i and 3 plus 5, 3.5 plus 2.0 I, right, what I will get 5.5 plus 5.0 I, right. So, this will be returned in line number 20, right. So, when it is returned, if you look at the main program, that will be stored in result, right. So, that means result dot real will be 5.5 and result dot imaginary will be 5.0, right. So, you can see over here, right. So, that will be returned to result. So, result that carry real part and imaginary part. So, whenever I have a complex, right, the object. So, here the object is result. So, the result that has real and imaginary, look at line number 6 and 7, right. So, that will be returned and right, this result dot add, when it is invoked, the addition will be returned to result. So, the result has real part and imaginary part. So, now see out user complex number you are displaying. What is user complex number? So, let us say 2 plus 3i, right. Suppose 2 and 3 are the input, 2 plus 3i, this will be displayed and constructor complex will be displayed. Now, sum of these two complex numbers. So, that is why the object oriented program will be elegant, right. So, you have done everything in the class, right, and then when the member function is doing all the addition, the constructor is doing all the addition, right, constructor initially saving, initializing, and then you have a member function that will be doing the addition, right. So, now here you have result dot display, sum of the complex numbers, result dot display. So, that means the result as real number, real part and result as the imaginary part. So, that will be displayed, right. Suppose let us assume my input is, I am giving 5.0 and 2.0 as a input, user input, right. So, we have already passed 3.5 and 2.5, that is a constructor. If you look at the program, we have passed this 3.5 and 2.0, right, 3.5 and 2.0, 5 comma 2 is my input, user complex, alright. So, when I add this 5 plus 3.5 is 8.5, 2 plus 2 is 4. So, I will get the output 8.5 plus 4i. So, the addition of two complex numbers, right. So, the crucial part here is, so when you are declaring the object, instantiate an object result, right. In the right hand side, this object result is invoking add member function. So, you are passing user complex. So, this will be considered as C1 inside the function, and this will be considered as C2 inside the function, right, copying the usual one, all right, call by value, call by reference, all right. So, here it is C1, you are passing, right, user complex, and you are passing constructor complex, right. So, when you are passing this, this will be assigned to C1 and C2, it is exactly happening over here, and then the corresponding reals will be added, corresponding imaginary will be added, and line number 20 it is returning the complex object, right, which is carrying some real and some imaginary, right. So, it is nothing but, you look, it is a special member function kind of, right, complex, some real, some imaginary, right. So, here you have, when you look at the constructor, complex double R double I, R will be assigned to real and I will be assigned to imaginary. This is what exactly happening, all right. And then where it is returning, you can see that it will be returned to the result. So, that means the result as real part, result as imaginary part. So, that is what exactly we are displaying in line number 52 and 53. Okay. So, this is how this particular program is working using parameterized constructor. So, you can do the same problem in one more way, right. So, how to do that? The same, right. So, we have real imaginary, we have this constructor, it said that it is nothing but the parameterized constructor, up to line number 15 it is same, and here you go. So, here we have complex add, right. I have complex reference variable other, right, is exactly like few classes back we have done, right, addition of two distances if you remember, right, feet and inches. So, here you have real with the other real, right, imaginary with the other imaginary. So, we will see how this will be working, and rest of them are same. We are going to return the some real and some imaginary, whatever we had seen in the previous program, and the display function, right. So, only this part is crucial, we are going to see how this is working. So, now the user real and user imaginary, all right. So, when you are creating this particular object, the constructor, parameterized constructor will be invoked with the user real and user imaginary, and then another one is constructor complex, you are passing the value 3.5 and 2.0, exactly the same value we are passing, only the line number 16 to 21, all right. So, it is a different way. In fact, we had seen this, I will explain one more time for the other example. So, now you can see this, right, you have declared complex result. Now, the user complex is invoking add member function, and you are passing constructor complex, right. User complex is invoking add member function, and then you are passing constructor complex, right. So, if you look at the syntax, it goes like this: complex and other, complex reference other, which will be equal to, right. So, complex and other, correct, which will be equal to constructor complex. Right. So, the meaning is other and constructor complex is pointing out the same location, right. You are copying the reference, right, pass by reference, right. So, user complex is invoking add function, you are passing constructor complex. So, complex reference operator other. So, both are pointing to other which is available in your add function, right, that is also a complex object, right, complex class. Other object is a complex class, and constructor complex, which is also a complex class. So, they are going to point out the same location, right. So, content will be same. So, suppose I have what is that constructor complex, your 3.5 comma 2.0 means other will also have now 3.5 comma 2.0, okay, that is the meaning. So, since here your user complex is invoking the function, right, since the user complex is invoking the function, your real user complex real whatever you are writing as a input, giving as a input user complex, right. So, that will be your actual real and the imaginary, the user complex since it is invoking. So, the user complex real will be real here and user complex imaginary will be imaginary here, and then rest is same, you are adding the corresponding real part and you are adding the corresponding imaginary part. So, then you are returning. Now, rest of the things are same whatever we had seen in the previous program, all right, when you run the code, all right. So, now it is everything is same. So, only here it is crucial, line number 44 is crucial, user complex is invoking. So, that means user complex dot real will be the real that you are using in the function, and user complex right imaginary, user complex imaginary will be imaginary, right. So, now you display the user complex numbers, constructor complex numbers and the sum of these two. So, when I run the code, assume that 5 comma 2 is my input, right, assume that 5 comma 2 is my input and 3.5 comma 2.0 we are passing, all right. So, we will get the output 8.5 plus 4i, all right. So, 5 plus 3.5 8.5, 2 plus 2 is 4, right. So, this is how we can have the usage of parameterized constructor, right. So, in one case we have done the result is invoking the add function, all right, you are passing two arguments C1 and C2, user complex and the constructor complex, correct, and then it will be copied to C1 and C2 and then rest is same, the corresponding the real numbers, the real part will be added, real parts will be added and the corresponding imaginary part will be added. So, the complex addition have been done, right. So, this is the case when the object result itself is invoking add, right. So, in another case here you have the user complex object is invoking the add member function and then you are passing constructor complex. So, when you are passing the constructor complex, the user complex dot real will be the usual real in the function, right, that is line number 18, and user complex imaginary will be the imaginary in the function, right. So, other anyway the other will be copied, right. So, that means this constructor complex will be copied into other. So, other dot real and other dot imaginary. So, the corresponding real part and the corresponding imaginary parts will be added and then that is returning some real and some imaginary. So, when we are running the code, all right, so we are getting the same output. So, this is how we can use the applications of the parameterized constructor. So, we had seen several applications on the default constructors and the parameterized constructor. So, in the parameterized constructor this particular problem it is slightly interesting because the two input, that means the real and imaginary you are taking from the user, another one you are passing as a constructor. So, slowly you are getting familiar with these object classes, the constructors concept, right. Apart from that we had also seen is it possible to define the member function outside the class. So, in a similar way, So, the special member function constructor you can think of whatever program that we have written so far. So, is it possible that can we write this constructor outside the class with the syntax that we have used. So, the next concept we are going to see copy constructor, right. So, what do you mean by copy constructor? So, here let us assume we have the class example, right. So, let us assume we have class example. I have one member data int a, right. So, I have one member data int a, right. So, here I have one parameterized constructor, the usual one parameterized constructor. Now, you know example, right. So, which is same as the name of the class, which is same as the name of the class, and you are passing one parameter int x, right. So, you are passing one parameter which is int x. So, here you have it is a special member function. So, I am copying x into a, that means a equal to x, I am copying x into a. So, a equal to x, and now here I have another constructor. So, this is the copy constructor, right. So, here you can see the name of the class example and I am using object reference, right. So, example is the class and here the object reference address OB, right, and OB dot A, the object dot A is equal to A, right. So, in fact, A equal to OB dot A, right, OB dot A is assigned to A, I mean to say, right. So, A is equal to OB dot A. So, this we call it as copy constructor. So, we will see in the main program how we can use this, all right. So, here you go, your class is over here, line number 15, your class is getting over. So, now this is the usual one when you are calling, when you are creating the object E1, all right. So, you are creating an object E1 by passing the value 36, all right. So, what is exactly happening in line number 19, all right. So, that means you are calling the parameterized constructor, right. You are creating an object E1, passing the value 36, all right. So, the meaning is you are invoking, all right. In fact, this will be the E1, right, when you are creating E1. So, it is automatically invoking constructor. So, here in this case parameterized constructor because you are passing the value 36, right. So, that means A is taking the value 36. So, here you are passing, so int x, so x is 36. So, 36 will be copied into A, right. So, A equal to 36 for the object E1, for object E1, right. So, it is nothing but E1 dot A which is equal to, suppose I am accessing this from outside, right. In fact, it is outside, E1 dot A is 36, right. So, the next line, so slightly different, first time we are seeing, you have the class example and then you have object E2. So, object E2 you are passing another object E1, right. What is the meaning of this? E2 you are passing another object, right. So, that means your example is the class, name of the class, address OB which is equal to what you are passing? E1, right. So, when you are creating this object E1 will have some memory, right. So, let us say this will be the location 400, all right. When I display E1, see out E1, so it will give 400, location 4002. So, now when I have this, right, example reference operator OB, whereas if you look in the main I am passing E1, right, I am passing E1. So, when I am passing E1, right, so here you go OB and E1 which is pointing to the same location, right, OB and E1 which is pointing to the same location, right. So, we know E1 dot A is what? 36. E1 dot A is 36. So, OB is pointing to 4002, E1 is also pointing to 4002. Assume that this is some hexadecimal number, correct. So, E1 dot A is 36, that we know already, right. So, now if E1 dot A is 36, what is OB dot A? That is also 36, because both are pointing to the same location, correct. OB dot A is 36. So, that you are assigning to A, that is the meaning. OB dot A is A, right. So, now when I want to print E2 dot A, right. So, that means when I am creating an object OB dot A, you are passing, right, assigning to A, meaning is your E2 dot A, which is also 36, that is the meaning, right. OB dot A you are assigning to A, OB dot A is what, 36. So, here when it is equal to, right, A equal to OB dot A, so A equal to 36 for object E2, otherwise you call it as E2 dot A is 36, alright, E2 dot A is 36. So, when I want to display this line number 21, C out is E2 dot A. So, you know the output. So, what will be the output we will get? We will get the output 36, right. I hope it is clear for everyone. And line number 20, if you look, so this is called the copy constructor, right. First time we are seeing, we have seen default constructor, we had seen parameterized constructor, and this is the syntax for the copy constructor. So, object E2 is an object and you are passing object, that object is E1, you are passing the object E1. So, and then once you are passing this, so this is the syntax. So, example address OB which is equal to E1, right, example address OB which is equal to E1, and then if you look over here, both OB and E1 is pointing to the same address. So, that means E1 dot A is 36, OB dot A is also 36, right. So, when OB dot A is 36, when you are assigning to A, so this will be nothing but E2 dot A, right. The meaning is this is nothing but E2 dot A. What is the value of E2 dot A? 36. So, when you are trying to display this in the main E2 dot A, you are getting 36, alright. I hope it is clear for everyone. And the last concept that we are going to see in C++ is the destructors, right, in today's last class. So, let us consider the class employee, right. So, here you have the default constructor, alright. So, default constructor you are displaying constructor invoked, and then first time we are seeing this is destructor, right. So, this is destructor. So, destructor symbol is tilde and then you have employee, same almost like a constructor, but only difference is you put the tilde symbol. So, that is nothing but destructors, right. When you are creating a memory, alright, when you are creating an object, you require the constructor, alright, for the memory, and then you have to destroy the memory. So, for that you require destructors. So, you might have used the new operator and delete operator, right, in the case of array, right. So, new operator is for allocating a memory and delete operator is for destroying the memory, alright, deallocating the memory. So, for the deallocation we have the destructors, right. Assume that you have an object E1 whose class is employee, right. So, you are just printing C out address E1, I am printing address of E1, right, I am printing the address of E1, and another object E2, I am printing address of E2. So, when you are creating an object, constructor will be called, right, when you are creating the object, constructor invoked will be displayed, right. So, constructor invoked, I will just simply write CI, stands for constructor invoked, and address of E1 it will print some number, right, hexadecimal number, address of E1, and employee E2 constructor will be invoked, and address E2 some other address 0x23 E7 something like that I am writing, some other address, and then return 0. So, before that you will have the distractor, that means you are deallocating the memory for E1 and E2, right. So, 2 more output you will get because of 2 objects. So, you will get distractor invoked, right. So, I will write di 2 times, continuation di, di stands for distractor invoked, ci stands for constructor invoked. So, this you have to get these 4 as output, right. So, you can see here, right, constructor invoked whenever you have employee E1, then you have address E1, employee E2 constructor invoked, and then you have address, and finally, before going to the return 0, both E1 and E2 because of this tilde employee, the distractor. So, what you can do, you can try without line number 10 and 13, right, without line number 10 and 13 you try the same program, the last 2 output will not be displayed, right. So, this is the usage of the distractor, that means now this memory space, right. So, these 2 will be deallocated, that means the object E1 and E2 are deallocated from this memory space. So, that is the meaning, right, that is what you are getting as a output. So, in today's class, so we talked about the parameterized constructor and then the applications that we had seen in terms of addition of 2 complex numbers. We had also seen one more constructor called copy constructor, and now you know the meaning of distractor as well. Thank you.